Hey Lexi, are you ready to get raw on this episode?
Totally.
And let's get the conversation started. Hello and welcome to LexiCon. It is Maddie.
Lexi.
And Dylan.
And I've had wrestling on my mind because we've been having a lot of fun with it lately. I really enjoyed watching the Hall of Fame ceremony. WrestleMania 39 was great until the end. And then we got that debacle of a Monday Night Raw, during which we heard that Vince had usurped control of creative, which I don't necessarily think is such a good thing at this point, but I guess we'll see. And of course, all this happened amidst the report that the WWE has now officially been sold to be merged with the UFC under the umbrella of Ari Emanuel's Endeavor. Meaning, for the first time in something like 70 years, a McMahon does not solely own, or principally own, or own the majority of, a wrestling company.
Interesting.
Which I also don't think is a very good thing. Now, I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't believe that the McMahons are the end-all, be-all when it comes to professional wrestling. But I do think they are some of the only people left who are in a position to own a wrestling company who really understand this business inside and out. I mean, technically Vince still has control of the company. For now, at least, Triple H is still in creative and he's part of the McMahon family. So we'll see how it goes. But at the end of the day, they don't own the company. It's not completely in their control.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, hopefully it'll all turn out fine.
Should also mention a couple other things, wrestling notes. Heard that one of my childhood wrestling favorites, Rick Steiner, had a really ugly incident at a wrestling convention over the weekend during WrestleMania, so fuck him. Not literally. But I hadn't necessarily been a big fan of the Steiners for a while, but they were one of my favorite tag teams in the early 90s when I started watching. So it's a shame to hear about that, but some people are just assholes.
Yeah.
And we also lost another member of the wrestling fraternity as Butch from the Bushwhackers and Sheep Herders passed away over the weekend. So condolences to his fans and family. And I should say at the top here, we're recording this on Good Friday. So by the time it comes out, we'll have had at least another Raw, 2 more SmackDowns. And who knows how much more wrestling news. Obviously, we can't comment on any of that because we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because we're once again going to look back to the past. Back to the time that I had the most fun as a wrestling fan I think I've ever had. We're going back to the Attitude Era. Specifically 1998. We're going to be watching an episode of Raw from April 13th, 1998, which means at the time this episode goes up, we're just past the exact 25th anniversary of the show. Now, Raw had just debuted on USA in January of 1993, which means we just passed the 30th anniversary of that. It had replaced WWE's program Primetime Wrestling on USA with a new, mostly live show on Monday nights. Then, about 2.5 years later, in September of 1995, WWE's only national competition, Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling, launched their own Monday night show to go head-to-head with Raw, WCW Monday Nitro. And now, the first episode of Nitro went unopposed, and the second episode did beat Raw in the ratings. But from there, for the first several months of the head-to-head competition, the ratings were pretty much back and forth. They were pretty much even. One might win 1 or 2, the other one would win 1 or 2. Nobody had a real distinct advantage. And I do want to point out, too, when we're talking about ratings back then versus now, currently I think Raw's ratings are something like a 1.8 million. I think currently Raw's ratings, I think, are about 1.8 million per show. Something in that area, just south of 2 million. Back in this era, we're talking about 1998, each show had roughly 3 to 4 million viewers per Monday. And I know there's some crossover there with people flipping back and forth like my dad and I did, but that doesn't account for all the viewers. Some people are only watching one or the other, so you figure that's probably about 6 million people watching wrestling on any given Monday night.
Yeah.
And at Raw's height, it would have 6 million viewers a night on its own. So I just say that to say how much the landscape has changed, both in part because wrestling is less popular than it was, but also because entertainment has just become so stratified. You know, back then you had a couple hundred channels on cable to compete with. Now you've got a couple thousand options at least between streaming and, you know, YouTube, virtually anything on the internet. TikTok is competition for eyes. There's still even more cable channels now.
Yeah.
So we're probably never going to see those kinds of ratings again. But anyway, like I say, the two shows were pretty much equal head-to-head for the first several months. But the ratings competition took a turn in May of 1996 when Scott Hall, fresh off a run on WWE television as Razor Ramon, showed up on Monday Nitro and began the invasion angle that would spawn the NWO and would lead to an 83-week winning streak for Monday Nitro. The episode of Raw that broke that streak is the one that we're going to be watching tonight. This is the second Raw after WrestleMania 1998, which is, of course, when Stone Cold Steve Austin first won the WWF Championship. We watched that on our previous episode. And they teased a show-long storyline in which Steve Austin was supposedly going to wrestle Vince McMahon in the main event. Now, that might not seem like that big of a deal now, but besides the fact that they were in the beginning stages of what would be the hottest feud in wrestling over the next several years, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon, it was a big deal for Vince to be getting in the ring because he'd never done it before. Not as a wrestler, anyway. Mm-hmm. He had engaged in some physicality. Austin had stunned him a couple of times. Bret Hart had shoved him over the desk. So there was a little bit of that, but he'd never done anything close to actually wrestling a match. Mm-hmm. Plus, he'd only recently been revealed as the owner of the WWF. I mean, most people knew that, but on the television show, they didn't acknowledge that he was just the announcer.
Yeah.
So this was uncharted territory here. And back then, the Monday Night Wrestling shows were pretty much appointment viewing for my dad and I. But at this time, I wasn't at home where I still lived with my parents. I think I was 8. Yeah, I was 18 at the time. But I was out of town visiting family in the very same city in which we live now. Mm-hmm. So I actually saw this episode here where we live now instead of in my hometown. But the cool thing about it was I don't remember who made the phone call specifically, but once it was announced that Stone Cold and Vince were going to take each other on the main event, my dad and I were on the phone with each other like, you see that? You see what's going on? Oh my God, I can't believe this. So that's a neat little memory. It's neat to watch it again here in the same city where I saw it the first time. So we got about it. Technically, it's an hour and a half of Raw ahead of us, but this has actually got a little bonus action on it, which I think is what the live crowd saw that wasn't aired on TV at the time. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where it would have been seen before, maybe on a DVD edition or something. Certainly the network wasn't around back then to show it. But
yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and go through the full hour and 42 minutes. So we got almost 2 hours of show ahead of us, so we really want to get into it. I think I'm finished with my preamble.
All right.
For those of you watching along, of course, we're going to give a countdown. We'll say 3, 2, 1, and we'll all play on play. Hopefully, however you're watching, probably on the network. I think that's the easiest way to watch it now. But probably not the only way. There may be a DVD copy of it out there somewhere. Some of you may have your old VHS copies from when you recorded it. And some of you may not be watching at all, but we'll still try to make it entertaining. But for those of you who are watching, get zeroed out so that when I say play and we all play together, we'll go right into the show. There'll be no FBI warnings or advertisements or anything else. Alright, so if you are watching on Peacock, Monday Night Raw can be a little annoying to get to because if you go to the banner up top where it's got the different components of the WWE part of Peacock, there's a button for Raw, but that only takes you to select episodes of Raw, different categories like some Attitude Era Raws, some Ruthless Aggression Era Raws, some Classic Raws, etc. You actually have to go down to the image that says, this must be Monday, and that's the full grouping of Raw. So navigate down to there. You're going to go to Season 6, Episode 15. It took place, as I said, on April 13th, 1998. We're all zeroed out. Hopefully you are as well. I'm going to give us a countdown, and we will all play together when I say play. So without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, play. And we are into it now. We, of course, have our closed captioning on. That's the old World Wrestling Federation intro. One, I'm like, just going,
lots of flashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of representative of the times. As you see the corporate Stone Cold coming out. This was Vince McMahon's attempt on the previous Raw to turn Stone Cold into the sort of corporate champion that he wanted. So you've got Austin in the suit and tie. It looked like he was going to acquiesce to McMahon's wishes, but then, of course, at the end, he's going to stun him or whatever to set up the goings-on on this particular episode.
What is that look in his face?
Who, Vince or Steve?
Vince, yeah.
I think that's a little unsure. He's happy, but he's a little unsure. Look, for whatever you want to say about Vince, he was a great performer, and he had great facials. And well, I don't mean that he's getting pampered. Somebody's coming on his face. I mean, the looks on his face. You talk about in wrestling, people who have great facial expressions. He can really express whatever emotions his character was supposed to be doing. It looks a little odd to see Austin strip out of the suit down to his wrestling tights. It's like he's just out there in his underwear now.
Yeah.
It's not, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
Little shot to the groin for Vince. Just a little backhand tap. I assumed Vince would have gotten a stun in here, but I don't remember for sure. It looks like maybe not. But really quick, I want to go back to that intro too, that Attitude Era intro. I like the one before that one where it was like, the World Wrestling Federation, for over 50 years, the worldwide leader in sports entertainment. I appreciated that one the most. And here we get the Raw intro, because, nothing says professional wrestling like guard dogs in an empty warehouse. Stone Cold strolls through an apocalyptic landscape.
A lot of explosions.
I'm not sure if this... Okay, yeah, Brett's still in this one, so this is still the older one that they'd done in 97.
The wing is on fire?
Because, of course, as we talked about, Bret Hart had left the company in November of 1997 in the wake of the Montreal Screwjob. Mm-hmm. We watched that match that took place at Survivor Series 97 on a previous episode, and he's still in the intro there. But sometime later this year, they would change that intro, and Bret wouldn't be in it anymore. That's how you can sort of mark time by when the intro was. And there's the pyro going off. Don't see that much anymore. And that stuff is loud in the arena too. I've been to
Also
a few
quiet.
Raws. I've been in the bowl of the arena here, and I've actually been outside in like the hallways that go around the arena before you walk down into the main entrance, and it's loud in both of them. I warned you guys before we went to Raw back in 2018 about it, but they weren't really doing pyro back then, so sorry about that. And they were in Philadelphia, the site of next year's WrestleMania.
Nice.
Also site of WrestleMania in WrestleMania 15 in 1999. What's up, Dill?
I saw like a alien thing.
There are a lot of
green alien.
signs. See Big Mama 316, and there we see Jim Ross and Michael Cole. That's an interesting announced duo. Michael Cole is generally a play-by-play man. So is Jim Ross. At this time, they're announcing together. I don't know what the backstory on that is for sure. The most famous announcing duo during the Attitude Era is, of course, Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler, with Jim Ross, the play-by-play man, Jerry Lawler as the color commentator. But this one is Michael Cole and Jim. Michael Cole and Jim Ross.
Yes.
I thought I was saying Michael Cole twice, but for a while, Michael Cole would actually take over for Jim Ross, and it would be he and King on Raw, and then Jim would come back. Jim would be in and out of the Federation for various reasons, but he and King are the most iconic announcing duo, and perhaps the best announcing duo of all time.
Nice.
Probably my favorite duo of all time. Jim would be second on my list of favorite all-time announcers behind Gordon Solie, even though, to be fair, I've seen a lot more programming with Jim Ross than Gordon Solie, but when I did get to see Gordon Solie, I really appreciated his work.
I think there's more signs in this one than the last one.
I think there's more signs in this one than there are members of the audience from most Raws nowadays. I'm not saying they don't still do big business, but this is a big arena full of people,
This is a
and
lot of
most of them have
signs.
signs. Maybe not most of them, maybe not even the majority, but there's a lot of signs.
think
There's more
someone
signs in this
like,
one than people who
multiple
likes the
signs.
latest Raw.
to hold up for different things.
I think somebody's got a sign that says like "Happy 100th Birthday, Hulk Hogan." Cactus Jack killed Tupac. I don't think that's true. The Happy Birthday Hulk Hogan is just ribbing Hulk Hogan, who spent most of his career, at least the most well-known part of his career in the World Wrestling Federation before going to WCW, where he's starring on Monday Nitro at this point. Mm-hmm. And WWF was, sort of quick to point out, hey, our stars aren't, super old, which, I mean, to be fair, Hogan at this point is probably younger than I am right now. But he was fairly long in the tooth for a wrestler, especially back then.
Yeah.
And we get Steve Austin kicking off Raw with an interview, as we would get a lot during this era. This would be a very common open for Monday Night Raw during this era. How many times am I going to say during this era?
He did not
Many
bring out
times
a
as
chair,
we
though.
talk about this era.
Some steel chairs to sit on.
I believe that gold necklace that he's wearing, it looks like it has a ring or something on it. I don't know the story about that, but the necklace itself was given to him by the late Brian Pillman, who was his tag team partner for a while in WCW, probably like 93-ish. And
Nice.
Brian had passed away in October of 1997. And for most of his career, Steve wore that gold necklace.
That's nice.
I don't like the red eyes in the skull on the back of his shirt. They make it look a little too much like the side of a monster truck or an 80s album cover. I do without the red eyes.
I think it's fine.
But he's on Raw. He has to have some.
I was gonna say it does fit in with the Raw stuff.
Yeah, you can see the banner behind him slightly that says...
That's a group of signs.
Yep.
Sorry.
Well, I was just saying you can see the banner behind him. It says Raw is War, because back then Raw was officially two different shows for ratings purposes. The first hour was Raw, and the second hour was the War Zone. And collectively they called them Monday. WWE Raw is War. Mm-hmm. Technically WWF Raw is War. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was better to have the top two rated shows in cable than one highly rated show. Mm-hmm. But it was still one show. But they would even officially sign off and show the copyright and everything as they went from hour 1 to hour 2. And then I want to say right after the attacks on 9/11, they dropped the war part. They're like, nah, that doesn't really seem appropriate anymore, and just went to just Raw again, which is what it was originally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting outfit.
On who?
On Vince.
It's the blazer and the dress shirt.
You have a lot to say about
yes, I do. I'm judging Vince.
That's pretty much standard Mr. McMahon attire.
always judge Vince.
Always.
Unless he was coming out to referee and he had the super tight sleeveless shirt on. I imagine that the SWAT team members that are accompanying Mr. McMahon and his stooges, Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, are probably like indie wrestlers or enhancement talent. Mm-hmm. I seriously doubt they're real correctional officers.
Yeah.
See, that's why Stone Cold should have bought a chair.
For all we know, they're wrestlers who people would get to know later on, but Just haven't heard of it at this point.
Always
I saw a
been a
South
show.
Park sign in the back with Kenny on it.
Yeah.
Of course, Austin holding the belt that's become known as the Big Eagle, which was the successor to the Winged Eagle. The Winged Eagle, of course, as I've said many times before, my second favorite professional wrestling belt as far as just the physical look of the belt.
Yeah.
This one's not bad. I don't like the blue strap. I like it better when they went to the black strap. And it's really not bad. It's really pretty much just a larger version of the Winged Eagle, but it's a little too big for me. Mm-hmm. It was not a terrible belt, but I'm not in love with it either. Mm-hmm. I got my mind made up. Come on, Brent. Alright, that was terrible. I'm not going to try to do a Stone Cold impression. Of course, as I mentioned, the gentlemen accompanying Vince McMahon were playing the roles of his stooges at this point. Real-life former wrestlers and backstage agents. Pat Patterson on the right, with the gray hair, with the jacket zipped up with the tie, and the dark-haired gentleman is Gerald Briscoe. Brother of former NWA World Champion Jack Briscoe.
He's the person wearing the interesting tie.
He is? The one with the ball spot? Mm-hmm. That's Gerald Briscoe.
Okay.
The darker-haired gentleman. Well, if I'd already identified Pat Patterson as the gray-haired one, and you know Vince doesn't have a tie, if there's only one other person left, that had to be Gerald Briscoe.
Another
Like
South
some sort of
Park sign.
striped
At least
tie
one-time owner
going
of
on.
Briscoe Brothers Body Shop in Tampa, Florida.
What's it? I've seen at least 2 South Park signs.
Gerald Briscoe and his brother Jack
3.
Park was popular.
played a big role in Vince's taking over of the territories during his national expansion because they owned a portion of Georgia Championship Wrestling, which had the primetime slot on Saturdays on WTBS, which WTBS was one of the first local stations to get put on cable as a superstation, and so it had access, around the country. Everybody could see it pretty much, so having that slot was a big deal. And they sold out along with a few of the other partners to Vince and allowed him to take over that time slot. And like 8 months later, Jim Crockett Jr. would buy out the slot from Vince for like $1 million or so. And the story always is that's the last $1 million Vince needed to produce WrestleMania. And of course, eventually Jim Crockett Promotions, after pretty much going national and fighting against Vince for various reasons, including their own ineptitude, but also Vince's machinations blocking them on pay-per-view and whatnot. We've talked about that before. Would eventually go under and be sold to Ted Turner to begin World Championship Wrestling, which was the last real national competition for WWE. I mean, you could argue that AEW is national competition now, but I don't think they're anywhere. Well, I'm sure they're a very successful company, and they have a presence, and I don't think they're going anywhere, or I don't think they're feeble in their efforts or whatnot, but I don't think anybody's at the level of what, they're not on the verge of being sold for $9 billion to another company and being merged with another successful fighting promotion, so
Yeah.
nobody's at the level that WWE is and probably never will be again at this rate. I mean, you can never say never, but
That's AEW's big goal.
as we said
They
before,
won't.
I mean, WWE, they were the last ones to knock the WWF/WWE into the number 2 position. They were legitimately the number 1 wrestling company in at least North America. Well, at least in the United States. I don't want to get into the argument of were they bigger than the Mexican companies. And I mean, I guess they were on some levels, but I guess on some other levels you could argue that the Mexican companies were bigger, at least within their country.
Yeah.
But I digress. I don't know enough about that aspect of the business to really speak on it.
Yeah.
But as far as the major promotion in the United States, you had WCW, you had the WWF, and for a time, in 1996 and 1997, pretty much all of 1997, some of 1996, and the beginning of 1998, if not the first half of it, WCW was the number 1 promotion in the country.
Nice.
We've talked about that before on previous episodes, and again, during part of that is during the 83-week win streak would fall into that era as well, which, it's not all determined by television ratings how successful you are, but
Yeah.
that was in the same time period, of course.
Has there ever been a wrestler that,
The big gulp from Vince. And I don't mean he's taking a drink, it's the gulp of fear with the big Adam's apple.
that typically gets over really well on, with crowds and whatnot, but for some reason it doesn't go as well on TV, for some reason?
I mean, probably.
I was gonna say, I don't know how to word that question any better.
I get what you're saying. They're popular to the live crowd, but they don't pop ratings.
Yeah.
They're not considered successful or, a ratings getter on TV. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of examples of that.
Yeah.
And part of it comes down to how you define being successful with the crowd. I mean, it's just about getting the big pop. It's about them enjoying your entrance, that they're, into what you do in the ring. So I'm sure there's plenty of examples of that. Wrestlers who are popular live but don't necessarily get over big on TV for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, if the live crowd likes you, the television crowd or the live crowd for the television show is going to like you.
Yeah.
But it's more about how the company positions you at that point. They don't necessarily see you as a ratings mover, so they're not going to feature you in that role. Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, the response from the live crowd and the success or lack thereof for television ratings they're not really the same thing. It's two different beasts, Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not knowledgeable enough about it to really break it down, but I do know that just because, and even drawing a live crowd is not the same necessarily as drawing television numbers. It's all intermixed to a degree, but they're also all separate.
Yeah.
And you can also see there's been plenty of times where a company might be doing really well in the television ratings, but aren't drawing so well at the arenas, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Like during a large portion of the 83 win streak, when not only was Nitro winning, but Raw's ratings were falling to, relatively low numbers, they were still doing really well at the house shows. They were still making money. Their pay-per-view numbers were still good, but they just weren't getting great television ratings. So it's interconnected, and it's not. Nice. But yeah, and like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of examples of wrestlers who are popular to a live crowd, but don't really get over on television.
Feels like we've gone a while without any wrestling.
That was very common in this era. A long interview to start out the show, a long segment where somebody would talk and usually would be interrupted and there'd be some back and forth.
Gotta have the filler. That's
pretty much the standard opening for at least Monday Night Raw. Now, Nitro would be more likely to start out with a hot match, but at various times they weren't completely head-to-head. Like, for the most part, once they both went to 2 hours, Nitro would start at 8 and end at 10, and Raw would start at 9 and end at 11. So when Raw goes on the air, it's got competition already. Nitro, I mean, there's other competition from other television networks, but there's no head-to-head wrestling competition.
Yeah. How old is Vince McMahon?
At this point, He's pushing 80.
Gosh,
I think he's like 78.
And he's still fucking writing wrestling stuff?
Well, as much as he ever did. He was never like the nuts and bolts writer. He would oversee creative and say, this is the direction I want to go, and he would rewrite a lot of it. And of course, we've kind of been ignoring what's going on at this point. They've set up the match. I think Austin said something like, I can beat you with one hand tied behind my back. And, that's going to come into play later as Raw rolls on. We go to break, but we won't see a commercial, of course.
Yay! No commercial!
But at this point, we've set up the match that it's, hey, I challenge you, Vince. You got to do it. And there's Patton and Gerald Briscoe.
The big slits in his suit.
Up the side of Vince's jacket.
Yeah.
The Bob's Big Boy jacket. You can really see the checker pattern in it that I didn't notice too much in the ring.
Yeah.
Those sort of big, just on this edge of ugly jackets were kind of Vince's trademark at the time, especially during his announcing career. And now the new D-Generation X comes out on stage. D-Generation X, as we've said before, started out as Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna, and for a brief time, Rick Rude was there as their bodyguard enforcer. Mm-hmm. But with Shawn being out of action after the injury and the one final match at WrestleMania, the night after WrestleMania, DX reformed as Triple H, the New Age Outlaws, who were Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg Jesse James, and the returning Sean Waltman, a.k.a. X-Pac, who had just been in WCW as a member of the NWO. Mm-hmm. And, of course, with Chyna still on the outside. Mostly, of course, she would begin wrestling later this year, maybe? Mm-hmm. We've got a chain match of some sorts here, but not a traditional chain match where you are chained to your opponent. This seems to be where the wrestlers are each chained to a corner.
Interesting.
This was a time, this was coming off the era where WWE had a lot of factions. In fact, as we've said, Survivor Series 1997 had the subtitle Gang Warfare. Mm-hmm. And the gentlemen in the leather vests are members of DOA, the Disciples of Apocalypse. And, of course, one of them is fighting on the outside with Billy Gunn from DX. But the other team in the actual match here are Los Boricuas, Savio Vega, and I'm not sure who the other member in the ring is.
It feels like this match started really quickly.
It did.
Yeah, well, this was the era where you did not have long. You didn't really have long television matches. It was get in and get out on the matches, and of course DX came down just to start trouble. They weren't even in the match. But I guess they were sort of pseudo-feuding with these other factions. Of course, these factions had grown out of the Nation of Domination, which started out as Farouk, who you know of as Ron Simmons, Savio Vega, and Brian Adams, a.k.a. Crush. And then Savio spun off from the group to create Los Boricuas. Crush created Disciples of Apocalypse. And then D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and eventually Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, joined the Nation of Domination. And of course, you've seen some of that depicted in the Young Rock series, somewhat accurately. Oh, we're in a spike pile driver here, on a chair on the ramp.
That took like 4 people to do.
Well, that's why it was a spike pile driver, because the one guy was executing the pile driver, the other ones drove him down onto the chair. But yeah, I'm not sure if I've ever seen a chain match like this other than here. Normally in a chain match, you're chained to your opponent. And oftentimes the goal is to drag your opponent around to all 4 corners, even though sometimes it's just a pinfall or submission match.
They tried it here, did not turn out how they planned.
Well, I think
never did it again.
I think they just wanted some organized chaos to start off the show.
Probably.
Just some action and an excuse for DX to get involved. DX were still heels at this point. They were definitely heels coming out of WrestleMania. And the night after WrestleMania, when X-Pac returned and they screwed Mick Foley and Terry Funk out of the tag team championships, they were definitely heels coming out of it, but they would be baby faces before the end of this year. And they would go back heel at other points, but before the end of this year, DX would be a babyface group. But I guess they're still technically heels at this point, although so are the other 2 groups. So it's one of those things where it's kind of weird because you're going to have heels wrestling heels, which again you didn't traditionally have in wrestling usually. Usually matchups are going to be baby faces versus heels.
Feels like heel versus heel makes a lot more sense than babyface versus babyface.
Well, the spirit of competition, though, if the point is to move up, you don't necessarily have a grudge match between babyfaces, although you can, but also you could have it's just a contender match where you're just, hey, it's competition, we're going to compete with each other, try to move up and gain the championship spot.
Yeah. But it's like with bad guys, like, bad guys have no need to, like, team up with other bad guys.
Oh, and a double low blow from China, and DX taking it to Los Boricuas. We pointed out on our last episode China's attire, and I just want to, once again, because she was gone from the match by the time we really got to comment on it, she's got the handcuffs for the belt. Still like that look. A little bit of a dominatrix look for her, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure who the other member of Los Boricuas is. It might be Jose Estrada. I know the one in the red tank top is Savio Vega.
Nice.
Well familiar with him.
He stands out from everyone else.
Once known as a TNT in Puerto Rico, I believe. Chains being taken out. He was the one who was the recipient of the quadruple team spike pile driver, or at least triple team. Just for your guys' sake, and for anybody watching who's not familiar with it, of course, Triple H is the member of DX with the long blonde hair. He's on the right now. Short blonde hair is Billy Gunn. China, of course, is the female. Road Dogg, Jesse James has the backwards hat, and Sean Waltman, a.k.a. X-Pac, is the one that had the long black hair with the red bandana.
Nice.
And we are back in the locker room with Vince the Stooges and a young Shane McMahon, who just had a really bad moment on WrestleMania.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for Shane. He was clearly emotional when he came out there, and then to blow out his quad in the middle of his big moment after making his return to WrestleMania, after having the riff with his dad and the rest of creative that caused him to leave the company for over a year.
Yeah.
But I will say, that was a dandy bit of improv from Snoop and the WWE crew.
Yeah.
Like
Snoop Dogg undefeated at WrestleMania.
I know apparently at some point the referee was giving Snoop instructions, but I don't know if anybody gave him instructions when he came in and threw the first punch. I don't know if anybody had time to talk to him at that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then, of course, the production crew was able to cue up Snoop's music, and the camera crew was following along, and this is what it was supposed to be. So, real nice bit of improv from everybody involved.
Definitely.
Except The Miz. He didn't really seem to do much. He just kind of stood there like, what the fuck?
Oh, like that. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But then he took the bump from Snoop and, went along with it. He didn't kick out or anything stupid, so... Interesting moment. But yeah, I really do feel bad for Shane.
Yeah.
Ironic that he would blow out his quad, though, after Vince did the same thing at the Royal Rumble in, 2005-ish. Wasn't 2005. Maybe 2008. I'm not sure. The year that, maybe it was 2005, because Cena and Batista were the last two in the ring that year. And the finish was supposed to be them going out close to the same time, but I guess Cena hitting first, and they accidentally both hit at the same time, so Vince had to come out and restart, and Batista would win. But Vince would blow out his... I guess he blew out one quad and then blew out a second quad, but he ended up blowing out both his quads and having to deliver his line to restart the match with him sitting in the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And not just a McMahon family tradition, but an extended McMahon family tradition. Triple H blew out his quad in a tag team match on Raw back in 2001, and he actually finished the match and even let his opponent put him in a version of the Boston Crab, which had to put incredible pressure on that quad. And now Vince is back out there. He interrupted what looked like a match featuring some luchadors, which are Mexican wrestlers.
It's just a rule. If you're a McMahon, you have to tear your quad in the ring.
So I guess Stephanie's going to come back soon and tear her quad. And then Linda.
So
Are Stephanie and Triple H's children or Shane's children going to do the same thing?
So does this rule apply to the McMahon women?
Depends on how much they're in the ring.
Okay, so it just applies to the McMahons in the ring.
Stephanie is a former WWF Women's Champion.
Sorry for Stephanie.
It only happens in the ring. Okay. It doesn't count if it's not in the
Technically,
ring.
I think Vince blew out his quads on the way to the ring.
Ah.
But it has to be, like, within a certain...
At least one of them went out
range
before he
of the
actually
ring.
got in the ring, or as he was getting in the ring, because he slid in the ring and then tried to stand up and couldn't stand up. I think this is when Vince is going to officially accept the challenge for the match in the main event. Let's see what Vince is saying here. He knows he's about to make a decision here, so yeah, like I say. And the luchadors who were supposed to be in the match, they're just standing outside like, what the fuck's going on, man? We were supposed to have a match. Now this old man's in there. I don't know.
Guess we'll just stand here.
Yeah.
Should we go to the back or should we wait? Are we going to get to do it afterwards? I don't know, man. Somebody's had their sign upside down. It's supposed to say Stone Cold Rules, but it says... Well, I guess it'd be backwards because they had it upside down, so it'd be like... Cellar... Deloc... Evets.
Best thing to do at a live show to bring like a whiteboard with a marker.
I think it's been done, but then again, I don't know if they'd want you bringing in something so big and heavy. They might be afraid you'd hurt somebody.
Okay, he's just bringing the material of a whiteboard.
I don't know. I suppose
dry
if you
erase
could,
material.
I guess if you could roll it up like a poster.
Exactly.
And then bam, you can change your sign at any moment.
In theory, you could just laminate your poster.
Someone turns heel in the middle of the match, you already got a sign for it.
Yep.
Easy.
First one with the sign.
Briscoe and Patterson back out.
What do you think of that tie?
It's a tie. I don't think anything of it one way or the other.
It's an interesting choice for a tie.
You
haven't
don't
even
even
really
judge
noticed.
people's fashion.
I am. That is precisely what I'm here to do.
It's just got
Like, it's not a bad
multiple
choice.
I'm going
horizontal
to ask you
stripes.
about every wrestler's fashion from here on out.
You do that.
It looks like a pretty standard tie of the era. Okay, more importantly, what do you think about Jim's varsity jacket and Michael Cole's jean jacket?
Yeah.
Which were the De Rigor announcer gear of the time.
It feels appropriate for each of them.
What do you think about his hat?
It just looks correct. That also looks correct.
Yeah, Jim's leaving ringside. I think the conceit here is he's going to try to talk Vince out of the match because he doesn't want
He's standing around in the
to
ring
see the
now.
company destroyed with the owner, well, getting destroyed by Steve Austin. Well, that's got to be rough for JR to go up the ramp with the lights out.
Mm-hmm.
Why are the lights out? Is Kane coming out?
I don't know.
Maybe.
There's so much
I have
happening.
no idea what's going on in this match.
It's Taker, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Gaba.
This match feels like it's just in the background.
There's a lot
Well,
happening.
yeah. Clearly, judging by the fact that I have no idea who any of them are, the luchadors weren't exactly featured on Raw at this point. They may just be there to take bumps for Taker, who just had a match with Kane after the whole, Undertaker, your brother's alive storyline that introduced Kane back in 1997 and eventually led up to their first match at WrestleMania 98.
Interesting.
This look for Undertaker is probably my favorite of the Undertaker look.
I like him with the hat and everything.
Well, I'm referring more to his actual in-ring gear.
Yeah.
If he was actually coming out for a match, he may have been more done up than this, but yeah, this still has a bit of the old school Undertaker feel, but it's not like the modern look, which I never really liked, which was just basically a singlet top and long pants, or the biker look when he was the American Badass. This is probably my favorite Undertaker look.
Nice.
I do like the classic Undertaker look, though, although I prefer the purple boots and gloves to the gray boots and gloves. Tombstone Piledriver coming up. And no, Undertaker did not name the Tombstone Piledriver. It existed in wrestling before him, but obviously makes a lot of sense for it to be his finishing move.
Yeah.
You know, I just fought Undertaker not that long ago in Castlevania.
And in case y'all didn't realize, his manager for a long portion of his career, who is now Kane's manager, but Paul Bearer, was a real-life Undertaker.
His heads are always
Or
wet.
technically a mortician. I don't know if they're the same thing,
I
but...
believe they're two separate things.
What about his head?
His head just always wet.
It's very common for wrestlers to wet their hair before they come out. It's just a good look. And plus it probably keeps it under control. If it's all dry and frizzy and just flying all over the place, that's probably very annoying.
Probably.
It's the entire time before his match, he's just staying in the shower.
No, but
staring
you
at the
pour a bottle of
wall.
water down your head or something right before you go out.
That's the call.
Triple H would literally do it while he was going out. He'd have the bottle of water and spit it and pour it on himself and throw it. So he's calling out Kane again, so obviously their saga is continuing. I mean,
That guy's
hell,
lying
it continued for 20 years probably.
Wow.
Everybody says that Undertaker is the all-time best gimmick in the history of wrestling.
Okay.
But I'd have to say Kane would have to be up there too, especially in terms of longevity. I mean, I think the guy who played it is a real piece of shit in real life, considering his current political leanings. But as far as a character with longevity, it's got to be right up there. I think it's Undertaker, I think it's Kane, and I think it's Goldust. We're not actually getting a commercial. I was going to say, it's not a real commercial. It's a sponsored spot where it's like, the Starburst.
War
Slam
2
of the
weeks
week.
ago.
Yeah.
Stone Cold's like, Vince, you didn't give me a Starburst!
Yeah, Vince did not sell the stunner all that well. He just kind of flops down.
I mean, you probably do that a lot more than bounce halfway
I was
across
going
the
to say, which is in contrast to The Rock, who would just bounce way up and flip around.
One is bimobilistic, the other looks a lot better.
One's realistic, one's entertaining.
I mean, I think if you really had your head jarred in something else short, there'd be a little bit of a pop-up.
Yeah.
You know, so there's Kevin Kelly, who I believe is the commentator for the English language commentator for New Japan Pro Wrestling now.
Interesting.
And during the break, we have JR back there. He's apparently wants to talk Vince out of this because he thinks it's a terrible idea and it's going to hurt the company. He's not a wrestler. I made my decision. That's it. I'm going to take back over control. I don't care how good a job Triple H has been doing. It's my company, damn it. Oh, wait. I think that's nowadays, not back then. But anyway.
I'm gonna get my Starburst back from Stone Cold.
Oh, how do we like the lining of Vince's jacket? There's like a plaid flannel lining inside of it.
It's a choice.
Well, you wouldn't see much of that, of course, if you had the jacket on.
On the inside of the jacket is something you really like. On the outside of the jacket is what people
You thought the
will
inside of the
accept.
jacket was the
No, I'm
was the
saying
good
for
part?
Vince.
I don't think
That was
Vince.
Vince's
I don't think
plan.
Vince is a flannel guy.
He might be when the camera's off.
It's that guy.
It's Jeff Jarrett,
I have no idea who that is.
third generation wrestling promoter. Founded TNA, which was the first national competition for WWE in the wake of WCW's demise. One of his J's is out. Did it come back on?
Okay.
Maybe.
Apparently a lot of his suit was out.
Yeah.
I actually like the out. I like the pleather for one thing. It's very reminiscent of Shawn Michaels' ring gear.
The suit seems to be very inconsistent on what lights turn on.
I'm not crazy about his actual in-ring gear. If he's wearing it at the time, we'll see. He's got this sort of weird top to his gear that I never thought looked that good. But I like his outerwear for his ring attire. Not necessarily top 10, but I appreciate it.
Are all the lights supposed to be going on every time, or?
I wouldn't even know. But his gimmick at the time was he was supposed to be like a wannabe country music artist. He'd get introduced as the world's greatest singer, wrestler, and entertainer. Mm-hmm. That was his gimmick. Actually, he had just come back to WWF not that long before this. He'd had a run with WCW in 96 and 97.
It's the legendary, quintuple overalls? Quadruple overalls?
Well,
on the back, it's only triple overalls.
Yeah, I never liked that look. Although I thought Seth Rollins' gear that he wore to the ring on WrestleMania looked very reminiscent of this. He took it off before he started wrestling, but his top looked very similar
I
to
was
that.
gonna say, I feel like
I called
that is an outfit I could see someone doing modern.
I called Seth Rollins' outfit at WrestleMania half Jeff Jarrett, half Shawn Michaels, all ridiculous.
I don't know who the other person in the ring is.
The other person in the ring is Taka Michinoku, who was the first WWE light heavyweight champion of the modern era. Member of Kai and Tai, star wrestler for Michinoku Pro over in Japan, and that's Steve Blackman in the split screen, the world's most dangerous man. No, that was Ken Shamrock. So, Steve Blackman was what they call him? Not the lethal weapon, the living weapon? Oh gosh, I can't remember now. Maybe it was the living weapon. Something to that effect. He's another legitimate MMA guy. Let's talk, it's a nice crossbody on Jeff.
It's like for all these matches, we only see like one person come out and then the match starts.
All those flyers in the ring from Jeff Jarrett's entrance, that's got to be kind of dangerous.
Probably.
I think that's a slipping hazard.
I think all this is kind of dangerous.
And we should point out really quickly a couple things here. The gentleman who was just talking with the announcers, that was Robert Fuller, who's part of the famous Fuller Welch family who promoted wrestling in Tennessee, Alabama, etc. Had connection with Jeff's father, Jeff Jarrett, and his grandmother, Christine Jarrett. Wrestler, manager. He was in WCW as Colonel Robert Parker, but a long-time institution in professional wrestling, especially in the South. And the man in the ring as the referee is Tim White, who passed away in 2021 and just went in the WWE Hall of Fame as the recipient of the Warrior Award. Long-time close associate of Andre the Giant. When Andre was in the WWF, he would be like his, I don't want to say his handler, but he would help him out, go around, be his, take care of things for him, because a guy that size is going to need some help getting everything lined up, and, I assume he lined up his travel and just took care of whatever he needed. And also owned a bar called the Friendly Tap in Providence, Rhode Island, which they talked about during the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
They would often shoot vignettes there where wrestlers, especially the APA, Ron Simmons and JBL, would tear the place up. And there's I'm not sure. I don't think his real name, at least his wrestling real name, was Robert Fuller. Mm-hmm. I think he was Rob Parker in WCW. I think he was Tennessee Lee in WWE. These gentlemen here are the other members of, I think what would become Kai and Tai. Mm-hmm. There are other wrestlers from Michinoku Pro in Japan, who I think came in as antagonists of Taka originally, and then he would join them to form yet another faction, along with their heel manager, Wally Yamaguchi.
It was all about factions at one point.
It was. 97 and 98 especially were. Of course, there's long been factions in wrestling.
Yeah.
At least in the 80s and 90s era, going back to the Four Horsemen, of course, and then the Dangerous Alliance, and then, of course, the NWO and WCW in this era really kick-started the faction frenzy once again, and then you'd have DX and the Nation of Domination, as we said, Los Boricuas, Kai and Tai. Did I say Disciples of Apocalypse?
I'm not sure.
I said it earlier. A little smirk from Stone Cold.
I don't know why, but that cut to the Stone Cold staring into the camera.
It was almost like he was posing for like a cheesecake, a beefcake photo, like that's sexy Stone Cold.
Just suddenly I know a Stone Cold staring
I'm gonna
dead
give you a little
into
bit of
the
sexy
camera.
Stone Cold. Yeah, you like that? All right, now back down to business.
That's the point.
What's gonna happen, Steve? Gonna settle it right here? Sure. And that's the bottom line. He didn't say Stone Cold said so. Mm-hmm. It's not real now. He didn't say Stone Cold said so.
Zoom into his face. Slowly.
And now you get the introspective Stone Cold. Vince has switched to a sweatshirt now.
Yeah.
Pat going with the short sleeves and the tie. Not a good look.
I like how that shirt is reacting to the camera.
I don't think the camera liked that shirt. It's very rainbowy.
I assume just due to technology and the stripes on the
Gerald
shirt.
Briscoe, legitimate hooker, which is a wrestler who could hook you in a hole and take you down. Showing Vince some moves there.
I did not like what the camera was doing.
I loved it.
Yeah, stripes were not the friend of
Ghostface
all television cameras. What, Ghostface Killer?
No, from Scream.
Where?
He's behind those people.
Oh.
Well, I could only see him for
They
a
better
brief
watch
second.
out. I hope there wasn't a murder on this show. I know who did it if there
I could only
was.
see it for a second.
Alright, here comes
And then just gone.
Ron Simmons, who was known as Farouk at the time, with the taped up ribs. Former leader of the Nation of Domination. So this is after Rock had usurped his role as the leader of the Nation of Domination, and they had kicked him out. Again, something we saw depicted with at least a degree of accuracy on young Rock. Yeah, people thought Rocky sucked at the time.
Yeah.
But since he's the heel now, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You want people to think you suck.
If you're a heel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not doing your job right if you're a babyface, and that's what they think.
South Park fears new episodes.
What's with all the South Park stuff?
Oh, South Park was. It only started like a year before this, and this was the initial height of its popularity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crossover between wrestling fans and South Park fans?
One,
Quite possibly.
probably. Two, it's like everything else we do now with all the cartoons. We see a new cartoon, we get obsessed, and we make everything of it.
If they don't say anything else, any other cartoon references in here.
How
Don't
many,
like
how
Homer
many
Simpson.
cartoons crossed over with wrestling fans at the time?
It's only South Park.
Well, South Park too was an Adult Swim type of show, so it was more for a teenage young adult audience.
That's what I'm saying. Like South Park.
When you just say
kind of
cartoons,
fits
people
in.
immediately default to like children's programming. That's clearly not what South Park is or was.
Very much.
Very much.
And here comes the Nation of Domination, led by current Intercontinental Champion
Oh my god.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, with
Dwayne "The
a very
Rock"
shiny
Johnson.
shirt. And Johnny would be surprised to see that The Rock had hair there. He'd be like, "That's not The Rock. He's not bald."
It's the guy from Fortnite!
I will strangle them.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Since some of y'all know is on the screen right now, do you think I could carry this segment for a second so I could dip out and come right back?
Maybe. You want to talk about that shirt?
Look, what do you think about
looks
that?
like he put duct tape.
Look, what do you think about the purple strap on the Intercontinental Championship? I'm almost
I can't really see
I don't
it.
really like that design. That's the newer design at the time,
Uh-huh.
not the classic, a more rectangular design. But it's also got a purple belt, which is it's interesting.
That's a very shiny shirt.
It is very shiny. It's probably a bit shinier than duct tape would be, but it is still making me think of duct tape.
Not as shiny as The Rock was a couple seasons ago in Fortnite.
Oh,
when he was turned into
God.
Chrome.
When he's turned into
Not
Chrome.
Google Chrome.
I want to see the Rock turned into Google Chrome.
What then?
No, I don't think that is something I can fathom in my imagination well enough to
Rocks
draw.
had the Google Chrome colors. Or something.
I don't know.
I'm going to install Google Chrome and place its icon
You
at the
see-
Rock's head.
Wait, you see the whatever it is in the background? And I don't know if it's that color because of the lights or if it's just
mean the
that
yellow
color.
thing?
Yeah. Can we discuss how terrible that color is? Because not even like just a pure yellow. No, it's like that
I feel like
desaturated
I
greenish
feel like a
yellow or
lot of
something.
yellows are not good yellows.
Yeah, yellow is one of those colors you have to be picky with. There's like a very small selection of good shades of yellow.
Yellow
And
is,
then the rest.
yellow is honestly one of the colors with the most bad variations.
Yeah. I feel like orange is a bit picky too, honestly.
Orange is pretty good for
You can have good oranges. That pastel orange on Roblox,
I feel like green is
like
50-50.
that. Yeah, green is... No, okay, wait. Do you prefer the lighter greens, the bright greens, or the darker greens?
Honestly, it depends on how yellow the green is, if it's good or not.
Okay, so you like...
Yellow's green
Oh,
tone.
wait, yeah, I was gonna say, that's another question. Do you like the more blue or the more yellow green? So you like a more blue-green. But now, do you like the ones that are kind of pastel, the ones that are, like, dark, earthy, or, like, the neon sort of blue-green?
Green type? I don't know.
Okay, see, there's this whole thing, and one of my friends, they really like the darker, earthy greens. I hate those. I like the lighter greens. And yeah, I agree with leaning more towards blue than yellow. Anyway, we are not discussing wrestling at this point.
I feel like the
People
half
are
green,
piling up on the Rock,
I
I'm
feel like
pretty
the
sure.
half green, once again, they have to do with the yellow being mostly bad, because the more
Yeah,
yellow
it
it is,
does.
the worse it is.
Look, okay, a yellow-green can work in some situations. Like, when I'm drawing trees and bushes, sometimes that's really nice. But just in general, I do prefer a different green. Green is... even though yellow has more bad options, green is my least favorite color.
Oh man, you can dial that number to save up to 50%. Better dial it! Where's my phone? Oh man, it's a 50%! I'm sure that number is still in service.
Totally.
For whatever this is.
Totally. It's only been how many years?
I don't know. A while.
This was 98. So 25 years.
Oh, 20. Oh yeah, 25.
Yeah, 25. We probably said that earlier in the show.
Yeah, 25.
There's not... Okay, there wasn't as many,
I guess we're already done with the
signs for
walk.
a moment. Yeah,
Man,
okay.
these matches are just coming and going. Like, gosh.
Yeah. It's odd.
People
Just
watch
like this
this?
person. I don't know who this is.
This doesn't seem that entertaining. Here's a match for 3 seconds. This is the best ever of WWE?
This feels like it's a very story-heavy one. It's not as much about the matches. It's more about a lot of story and setup and continuation and things like that.
It's like they come out of the like, I don't like you either. Okay, now have a good day, I'm leaving.
I don't think they told each other to have a good day.
A very gentlemanly rivalry. Well, my good sir, I do not like your face. I do not like yours either.
You know, Vance was almost wearing a coat that would be more fitting for a gentleman. But with those long slits, it was definitely giving those vibes. But the back would have needed to be a bit longer and the sides a little shorter. So, we discussed...
the walk
Maddie,
is all
I have
gone.
a question for you.
We should pay homage really quickly to Terry Funk, one of the all-time greats in the ring right now.
I literally just said I had no idea who this is.
Well, you do
And
now.
Lily said,
Former NWA champion,
Yeah, I saw the
ACW
name.
champion, brother to Dory Funk Jr., son of Dory Funk. In Mick Foley's opinion, the greatest wrestler of all time. Legitimately a legendary figure in the world of professional wrestling. And still with us.
Nice.
But anyway, continue.
Okay, so
I want to just jinx that. I'm going to get the news right after the show. Terry Funk. Fuck me. I'm so sorry.
like the day before you upload the podcast.
Oof.
Well, look, I said when we were recording this now, so I'm covered.
Anyway,
Okay, and here's Charles Skaggs, who was Too Cold Scorpio and other wrestling companies, but in the WWF, again, WWE now, I can't help it. Look, the logo back there still has the F. It's WWF.
I only know it as WWE.
He was Flash Funk, so they apparently decided that, well, from one Funk to another, we'll team Terry Funk up with Flash Funk.
And I don't know who these other guys
Terry
are.
Funk legitimately is a Funk. Flash is, well, he's a Funk, but only in the WWE. That's, on the left is Jacques Rougeau, the guy with the eye patches, Pierre Colloulet. Jacques Rougeau was the Mountie in WWF in the early 90s, son of former wrestler, son of a wrestler too. I don't know if it was Johnny Rougeau or Jacques Rougeau, because I think he's senior, and I think his son is Jacques Jr., but maybe he's Jacques Jr., and his dad would obviously then be Jacques Sr., and his uncle would be Johnny Rougeau, but a sign of the legendary wrestling family from, what's French Canada?
I don't
Quebec,
okay.
right?
Sounds correct.
Because Montreal is the city and Quebec is the province, right?
I believe so.
Sure.
Yeah. But at this point, I think the name of the team might be the Quebecers at this point.
Interesting.
And Jacques, as far as I know, is retired from in-ring competition now. His son is a wrestler, I believe, but PCO, Pierre Colloulet, he still wrestles now and actually has had a bit of a career resurgence in the last few years.
Ouch.
So anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay, yeah, I had a question for you. We discussed this while you were gone. So when it comes to the color green, do you prefer a green that's more yellow or more blue? That's the first question.
I prefer a green that's more green, just a nice dark green if I'm going to have green.
Okay, so
But
you
if I
just like
have-
as pure green.
If I have to choose between a yellowish green or a bluish green, I'm going to default to a bluish green. But a bluish green doesn't feel as much like a green to me. It feels more like a blue.
I feel like the more yellow green is, the worse it is.
But I'm not a fan of yellow-green in general.
Yeah.
So I prefer just a nice green.
Isn't that good of a color?
I'm sorry,
Yellow's
yellow.
fine on its own in certain applications.
Depending on the shade.
Like half the shade, more than half the shade
Pastel
yellow.
yellow, mustard yellow, and like your average.
That was a fun
yellow.
sign in the crowd. Who's Goldberg blowing? Goldberg was in the midst of a fictional winning streak on the other channel right now. This would be his one really big year. You guys have seen Goldberg in recent years when he's come back. He's the other big bald guy with the goatee. But he was on WCW in the midst of a fictional winning streak where he was getting over big time. Around this time, he would have won his first championship, the United States Championship, en route to winning the World Championship in the summer of '98. But this was the Goldberg Mania year. Mm-hmm. So were we done on the top of green?
You kind of already answered the second part of the question. That was going to be if you liked, one of the lighter greens, more like a pastel, or like a pure green, maybe a brighter neon sort of green, or a dark green.
I like a nice dull green. Like a matte green is what I mean by dull.
Yeah. Yeah, I said that I like the lighter shades of green.
I
usually.
like a dark forest green. That's really nice. That actually might be the best green the more I think
I
about it.
also do like some light and desaturated sort of greens. Of course, I like more of a blue green. Gaba said blue green, but he was unsure about the rest.
But hey, apropos of nothing, you guys know what the word controversy means and controversial,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, could you actually define it? Oh, here we see the sign off here. See, this is what I was talking about. We're signing off of Raw. and we're going to be heading into the war zone, even though it's just one program. But anyway, okay, whether or not you can, when I was out of the room for a minute, I had a conversation with somebody, and they said to me straight faced that they did not know what the word controversy or controversial meant, and asked me to define it for them.
Did you define that?
I did my best. I mean, I don't know the dictionary definition of it. Obviously, I know what the word means.
Yeah.
But I did my best. I was like, things that some people might find inappropriate, but others don't.
Yeah.
Things that elicit strong response and passionate response from people. But, I mean, it's just something you think you would know by now.
Yeah.
Speaking of members of legendary wrestling families, this is Luna Vachon from the Vachon family, who are also famous, I believe, from the French-Canadian, the French section of Canada. Montreal, Quebec City, that area. Adopted daughter of... See, I get them mixed up. There were brothers. There was Paul Vachon and... it was Paul the Butcher Vachon and then Maurice Mad Dog Vachon. And then their sister... Lillian Vachon, I think, and they were all wrestlers. And Luna here is the adopted daughter of one of the brothers, but I can't remember which one.
Nice.
I may have the name of the female. The other Vachon may not have been she may not have been a sister. She may have been the wife of one of the brothers. I apologize. I'm not completely up on my French-Canadian wrestling history, and I hadn't read anything about it recently, so it's not fresh in my mind. And here's the official start of the War Zone. We get the whole intro once again. Well, like I said, it was one show. Everybody knew it was one show. This was just more of a ratings thing, so they could boast about having two shows high in the ratings.
Yeah.
But the ratings of shows as they rate. You know what I'm saying? But it also may have played a hand in advertising. I'm not sure. But for whatever reason, we technically had two WWF shows on Monday nights, but we literally didn't.
It's felt like these matches are way too short.
You were not going to get long wrestling matches on TV back then. Those were going to be saved for the arenas and for pay-per-view.
It's like, here's a match, we're done already.
As the Attitude Era would go on, you would occasionally have longer matches, and especially if you had a main event match that was going to be more match than angle. So you would get longer, but by and large, the wrestling matches were going to be short. Speaking of Goldust, did I just notice? Did he just say? Are we in Greensboro for this show?
I don't know.
That's interesting. I did not realize this was from Greensboro. I'm pretty sure the closed captioning. No, they said we're from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I said about Greensboro.
Huh?
I don't know either.
Or did we miss? No, they were definitely in Philadelphia, right?
I definitely saw someone mention about Philadelphia.
Yeah. Huh. So what was he talking about? I know. Well, no, I don't know if the upcoming pay-per-view was in Greensboro or not. Because the next pay-per-view would have been... I don't think it was Over the Edge. I don't think it was Judgment Day. It might have been Unforgiven. I think Unforgiven was a September pay-per-view at the time. Anyway, Luna and Dustin had been having a thing, and he was going through some stuff right now. He wasn't sure what to do with the character.
Mm-hmm.
So this you're sort of seeing the dying days of the original Goldust character, but he would come back multiple times in the original guise of Goldust. That's why I say I think overall it's one of the more successful gimmicks. And that's Sable, former wife of wrestler Mark Merrow, current wife of wrestler Brock Lesnar. I'm not sure why I pronounced Brock's name. Brock. That was current wrestler Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lasagna.
Broccoli
Lasagna.
Brock, let's go.
Let's go, Brock. The new Pokemon game. A Pokemon mom hack or something does replace all the Pokemon with wrestlers.
I think I mentioned this before, but the word was around this time, since all the girls were being able to get breast enhancements as part of their deal, Dustin petitioned the office to let him get female breast implants as part of the Goldust character, but they passed on that.
The Rock would totally be Geodude Gravel.
He's probably happy about it now. At the time, it might have been a bitter disappointment. Stone Cold lacing up the boots, ready to stomp a mud hole in Vince's ass.
So every evolution would be like a different era of the character.
Now JR has joined. JR has been joined by Jerry Lawler, who recently suffered a stroke. We saw him at the Hall of Fame, but just on a video, so it seems like he's doing all right. But I mean, he's getting up there in age too. He actually had a heart attack on Raw 10 years or so ago.
Damn.
Nearly died then.
Damn.
But I guess the conceit here was they had Cole and Jim Ross do the first half of the show, or Raw, and then had Lawler join Jim for the second half of the show when it became the War Zone.
I don't know who any of these people are.
Maybe they did just call him the Lethal Weapon. That sounds more right now. It's Steve Blackman. We literally talked about him. That's Jim Cornette with the red shirt on. This is Steve Blackman, and the one in the red trunks is Ken Shamrock, both legitimate MMA fighters currently in the WWE. The man in the suit, the blue suit, is Dan Severn, another MMA fighter who had some fairly legendary matches with Ken Shamrock in, I think it was in UFC. If it wasn't UFC in name, it was some other mixed martial arts promotion. I don't know who the referee is. I apologize. The one with the blue blazer and the red shirt, of course, is legendary manager, promoter, booker, all-around wrestling savant Jim Cornette, whose podcast I've made y'all listen to probably more times than you would care to recount. And the other two wrestlers who are at this time being called the New Midnight Express, which the Midnight Express being the team that Jim Cornette most legendarily managed, one of the all-time greatest tag teams originally. Well, originally it was Dennis Condrey and I think Playboy Randy Rose. Definitely Dennis Condrey. But the incarnation most people know would be Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton, and then it would be Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, both under the management of Jim Cornette. But at this point they had been doing sort of an NWA invasion of WWF, kind of trying to play off what the NWO was doing on WCW. And this team with the really garish blue tights with the gold lightning stripes down the side are being called the New Midnight Express. And I believe it's Bodacious Bob and Bodacious Bart. So that's Bart Gunn in the ring. I knew it was Bart Gunn, but I couldn't remember the modifiers for their names. You see, they had the Emmy on the back for Midnight Express.
Interesting.
But when people talk about the Midnight Express, they're not really talking about this incarnation. This is not the Midnight Express. You guys need to just know that. And I see a sign in the crowd that says the Lethal Weapon, so I guess the Lethal Weapon was Steve Blackman's nickname. But that's Bob Holly, the one with the blonde hair tagging in, who was originally Bob Sparkplug Holly, because he was legitimately a race car driver and professional wrestler at the same time. And then he would become Hardcore Holly and sort of have a reputation for having hardcore matches. Sometimes teaming with his cousin, Crash Holly, cousin in name only. His real name was Mike. I can't remember his last name, but Mike's not with us anymore. Unfortunately, another member of the wrestling brother and sisterhood, gone too young. I can't remember what Bob's moniker was. If it's Bodacious... Oh, okay, Bombastic. So Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart in the place of Beautiful Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane, or Beautiful Bobby Eaton and Loverboy Dennis Condrey.
Interesting.
This is not one of the more fondly remembered times of Jim Cornette's career. I'll just say that.
Real quick, I did look up the dictionary definition of controversy.
Oh, I thought you were still looking up the Greensboro thing. You went to your iPad as soon as we were talking about that, and I thought that's what you were looking at.
I did try to look that up briefly. I haven't gotten those results yet. However, the dictionary definition of controversy is disagreement, typically when prolonged, public, and heated.
Okay.
And then, let's see if they actually... Yeah, okay, for controversial, it's giving rise or likely to give rise to public disagreement.
Yeah, we know what the word means. I struggled a bit to define it, because it's not something you feel like you need to define that often. It's like, you know what it means, right?
Yeah.
How do you go 40-some years and not know what it means?
Especially when you use the word.
I'm not sure this person's ever actually used the word.
I thought they
In
had.
the 20-plus years I've known them, but... No, I can't honestly say that I've heard them use it. Now, to be fair, I've had plenty of conversations with them. It's certainly possible that I missed it somewhere. But it's not something I know of them being prone to say. This Raw was definitely in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I found
confirmed that.
much.
Let me see what the pay-per-view was in...
there was one April 26, 1998.
Was that Over the Edge, or was that the other one?
Unforgiven.
Okay, it was Unforgiven. Unforgiven would eventually become the September pay-per-view. Yeah, Unforgiven was in Greensboro that year. And that's right. I remember that now because this was the time when Ric Flair was having a disagreement with WCW. He had missed a show to attend his youngest son's wrestling tournament. Mm-hmm. And he said he had permission, and I'm not sure that Eric Bischoff has denied that he had permission, but at some point he asked him to make the show, and Rick, having already had prior plans, declined to do so. And then he was essentially fired by Eric Bischoff, even though he still had a contract. He couldn't just be flat out fired, but Bischoff's intent was to rid WCW of Flair. So Flair was off WCW television in a disagreement with management. And he was actually, as I hear it, in a limousine circling the Greensboro Coliseum, waiting for word from his lawyer that it would be okay for him to appear in the crowd at WWF Unforgiven in 1998 with his son Reed, with the idea being that one of the announcers would go over and say, we're going to have a special interview with the wrestling champion now, and they would interview his son, who just won a wrestling tournament, and just kind of ignore Flair being there, but still have Flair on their television. But the lawyers never came back and said, yeah, you'll be fine doing this since you're technically still under contract with WCW, so it didn't happen. But yeah, I remember that now.
Interesting.
Once again, back to the rainbow shirt.
I know Raw would be in, I remember Raw was in, I want to say Charlotte, it may have been right after this, but I guess I was 99. Because I was in North Carolina that Monday. I'd driven up to North Carolina and was driving back home. And I knew Raw was in town that night. But yeah, that would have been 99, so. Raw was probably in North Carolina the night after Unforgiven too, but I couldn't tell you where.
Back to that
Can that
rainbow
guy
shirt.
just change his shirt?
No, I love it.
It makes my eyes uncomfortable.
The balding gentleman who was standing over the shoulders of Patterson and Briscoe, who's currently out of frame, that's Sergeant Slaughter. Legendary former wrestler, former G.I. Joe figure. And Dylan, you would probably remember him from the Camp WWE cartoons.
Yes.
You remember Sarge, right?
He's appeared at multiple cons in this area.
Well, you gotta do something once your ring days are
I
over.
find it hilarious that he was in G.I. Joe.
I don't know I don't think we've ever been
Supposedly
at this con,
that's what caused it. He was legitimately probably... Okay, Jimmy Snuka was probably the big guy in the WWF before Hogan got there. And then Hogan was the big guy. But number 2 right behind Hogan was Sergeant Slaughter. And then he had that deal with Hasbro for his likeness in G.I. Joe and for the G.I. Joe figure. And he had a better deal with them than the WWF wrestlers had for their action figures. And the issues over that are what caused him to leave the company at the time when he was probably legitimately the second most popular wrestler in the company.
Wow.
Interesting.
And then he wouldn't return until like late 1990 to do a traitor gimmick where he would pledge his allegiance to Iraq in the early stages of the Gulf War, and to set up the match with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 1991. I don't know if we've covered that much here or not.
So in G.I. Joe, would he do wrestling moves?
I don't know, Dylan. Because when I watched G.I. Joe, I wasn't a wrestling fan. My G.I. Joe days and my wrestling fan days didn't really cross over. I kind of grew out of G.I. Joe into wrestling. So I only knew Sergeant Slaughter as a G.I. Joe character. I'm sure my parents might have mentioned, he's a wrestler, or my friends might have mentioned he's a wrestler. Because my friends were all wrestling fans, so I'm not sure why we didn't partake in wrestling together until I got older, but...
We didn't watch some G.I. Joe, see if he ever, suplexes someone or something.
Maybe. I mean, it's not live action.
I mean, yeah.
So he was drawn into it, so...
I mean, you could animate a...
And yes, I did have the Sergeant Slaughter action figure, before you ask.
Do you still have it?
I don't think so. We do have some odd boxes of toys that I took out of my mom's attic when she moved out of my childhood home. But I haven't noticed any of the toys we've been through. Okay, well, here comes Kane.
From Final Fantasy IV?
The storyline brother of Undertaker.
Not nearly as cool as Undertaker.
Accompanied the ring by the late Percy Pringle, a.k.a. Paul Bearer. Real-life mortician. Real-life wrestling manager. Yeah, I believe at the pay-per-view coming up, Unforgiven, is when Kane and Undertaker had the Inferno match where they had the ring ropes lit on fire.
Mm-hmm.
If that piques your interest, maybe we can watch it for the next episode or something. I don't know if I've ever seen it.
You don't know?
I actually went through... Because I got a lot of wrestling pay-per-views as a kid. There were some years where I got every pay-per-view that was available. Now, again, to be fair, when I first started watching wrestling, there were 5 WCW pay-per-views and 4 WWF pay-per-views. And WWF would expand to 5 with King of the Ring. But by this time, each company was doing a pay-per-view every month. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you'd get 2 in a month. from one company, and then ECW was also doing pay-per-view at the time, so there was a lot out there. But even with that being said, we would get a lot of pay-per-views. There were probably years where we got at least one pay-per-view a month, if not more. But for some reason, we did not get a lot of WWF pay-per-views in '98, even though this was probably the year when I started getting more into WWF than WCW. Like, I liked both of them. I was initially more of a WCW fan. Then when Hulk Hogan came to WCW, I started becoming much more of a WWF fan. Then in the wake of the NWO, I started watching more WCW, but watching both. And then in '97, well, I mean, heck, I was a big Shawn Michaels fan, and he had his first big title run in '96. So I was watching a lot of WWF then, but that's also when the NWO kicked off. So Monday nights got really interesting for WCW. And then in '97, I probably gravitated more toward WCW, even though I don't necessarily think, by and large, the shows were that great. It was just like, what's going to happen? But then by '98, I was starting to shift back toward WWF, and because I just like what was going on there better by and large. But for whatever reason, did not get a lot of WWF pay-per-views in 1998. I went through the list of how many pay-per-views I got from each company every year during my peak fandom years. And I think I got like one WWF pay-per-view in '98. It was Survivor Series '98. No, two, because we got SummerSlam that year, because that was the Steve Austin Undertaker main event.
Wow.
You know, I just realized his name is like a pun, like the Paul Bearer.
Oh yeah, you didn't realize that?
No, I just realized that.
I'm so sorry.
Just click.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think...
Yeah. It was.
I don't think about...
Glad you got that, finally.
I don't think about the Paul Bearer as much.
You took a minute, Gaba.
I don't think about Paul Bearers much.
That's
Like,
a you
oh yeah,
problem.
Paul Bearers. Think about him every day.
Yeah.
Going back to the pay-per-views, I think part of the thing was WCW had a reputation for having much better shows leading up to the main event. They had a much bigger roster, and by and large, they had better wrestlers, so you got a lot more good wrestling matches leading up to the main events of the pay-per-views. Then the main events often weren't that good in the ring, but they at least had a storyline you were interested in. Whereas the WWF pay-per-views, they had a much thinner roster, and they didn't have as many good wrestlers. Mm-hmm. So their undercard would not be nearly as good, but the main events would usually be much better in the ring. But then it's like, do I really want to pay for just one single match, basically?
Yeah.
And sometimes you would, and sometimes it's not to say there wasn't good stuff on the undercard, but by and large you would get more depth on a WCW pay-per-view.
Shiny.
Yeah. A little bit.
Well, when he was turned facing foot, very shiny.
That's Sean Morley, a.k.a. Val Venus, another guy who I've heard is a real asshole in real life. But, yeah, he was doing a porn star gimmick back then. He'd be like, hello, ladies, and come out with the towel and whip it around. A lot of double entendres in his vignettes.
Odd gimmick.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it fit at the time, for sure. It was definitely not something that was going to lead to the main event. You were never going to have a porn star main eventing WrestleMania.
What are we missing in our ring? A porn star character.
But it definitely fit for the time. For sure.
I don't like the vibes.
I like the character. I was fine with it.
Bad vibes.
I'm sorry. We saw Kai and Tai, Proto Kai and Tai earlier. There was a deal where Val here was hitting on the sister of the manager of Kai and Tai, Wally Yamaguchi. Mm-hmm. And he didn't like it, so Kai and Tai kidnapped him, and they tied him up backstage and intimated they were going to chop off his penis with a sword. And they had this really bad stereotypical dialogue where it's like, I chop your pee-pee! And they went to black when he did it, and you saw the sword come down, and you heard it like hit the block, but Val came out later, and he was like it was cold back there, so there was shrinkage, so he missed. Look, it wasn't I'm not saying everything was good back then, but it was. I'm telling you what was. I'm not saying this was great, but you gotta know what happens. You gotta know the good with the bad.
Who was writing this?
Vince Russo.
Why?
And Ed Ferrara.
Gaba has a lot of questions for them.
Because by and large it was working. They overtook WCW in the ratings.
It wasn't good, but it
WWF was hotter back then than they ever were in the past or ever would be in the future. And I mean, it wasn't necessarily because of all that writing, but it did play a hand in its success. I mean, a big part of the success was the character Stone Cold Steve Austin and his byplay with the evil Vince McMahon character, but Yeah, I mean, they did it because it was working. And when what you're doing is working so well, you can do more stuff that isn't necessarily always the best, but you have that leeway. Look, what you're doing is making us a lot of money. It's getting over at the top. So if you want to do some stupid shit early on, we'll give it a try. Why not? You get that. Success brings you that leeway. And I mean, you can argue how much of the success was Vince Russo's creation. We saw him and Ed Ferrara go to WCW to head creative there in late 99, and they completely fell on their face, and they've never been successful anywhere else. But they were hot back then. How hot's Triple H right there?
Meh.
What do y'all think? Okay, so
Gaba has no thoughts.
So this is completely shallow, I realize, but who's the best looking one in the ring?
I have no idea.
We have Triple H, we have Billy Gunn, we have Sean Waltman, we have Jesse James, and Chyna. Take your pick. Or Timmy White, if you like the the rotund New England fisherman look.
I feel like I have a lot less choices than Alex.
Well, now you can appreciate the way somebody looks.
Well, yeah.
How many people are in the ring?
What's including the referee? 6.
Yes. I have 6 choices.
Same.
I have like one choice in the ring.
And it's Triple H, of course.
Of course.
The late Owen Hart, of course, we've talked about before, would pass away in a tragic accident in the WWE ring a little over a year after this. Youngest brother, Bret the Hitman Hart, currently in a feud with Triple H and DX at large. We saw their interplay at the Royal Rumble earlier in 98. We didn't see it in 98. We saw it just a few weeks ago on the podcast.
I definitely didn't see it in 98.
I would have only seen it in replays because I didn't get the pay-per-view. Like I say, 2 WWE pay-per-views that year. In WCW, I got Sold Out, which was the January pay-per-view. I got Super Brawl, which was the February pay-per-view. Let's see, I didn't get Uncensored in March. I didn't get Spring Stampede in April. I didn't get Slamboree in May. I didn't get Great American Bash in June. I got Bash at the Beach in 98. I got Road Wild in August. Bash at the Beach for the July pay-per-view. Didn't get the September pay-per-view. Did get the October pay-per-view because that was Halloween Havoc. Then I got Starting. So I got 6 WCW pay-per-views that year. Literally half their pay-per-views. I got 2 WWF pay-per-views. Although I would say at the time that WWF was my favorite of the 2 promotions. Although I still liked WCW in 98. 98 is the year they kind of started to go off the rails, but it didn't really manifest for the fans until 99. So I still really enjoyed WCW too.
Okay, honestly, the referee might be the best choice. I was thinking these people, they're like, what? That referee may have been the best.
Out of all these, you choose the referee.
Matt, who's your pick?
But Chyna. I always thought Chyna was hot. Even before she had the breast enhancements and the plastic surgery on her face, I always liked muscular women. I thought that was a good look. Don't get me wrong, I like
you and the rest of the internet.
I like pretty much women, period. But I'm gonna appreciate whatever anyone
you
has to
and
offer.
the rest of the internet.
What about you, Gaba? Settled on Triple H over there?
Says, yeah, well, these are the referee.
Well, look, even if you're not bisexual or pansexual like Alex and I are, you can still appreciate the way somebody looks.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously. I very much appreciate how Legolas looks.
Hawk and Animal, the one-time Road Warriors, one-time Legion of Doom, current Legion of Doom, or LOD 2000, accompanied the ring by Tammy Fitch, a.k.a. Sunny. These are definitely the waning days of the Legion of Doom. Once upon a time, the baddest tag team in professional wrestling. And then we go back to the ring to see Vince McMahon pumping up. I'm assuming we're going to commercial? Because if not, why weren't we paying attention to what was going on in the ring?
Yeah, not important. You think we're for wrestling?
And why were LOD out there? I guess because they were having...
And we're already halfway through the match.
With the New Age out... Well, I mean, that was a commercial break. That was 3 minutes of real time. Clearly something was going to... It's not like nowadays where the wrestlers come out and they just stand at ringside for 3 minutes during commercials, then they start wrestling.
People are complaining they weren't seeing enough of the match.
Although they will... Apparently it is pretty common on Raw now, and maybe even SmackDown, to start a match, then immediately go to commercial, and then come back and have like 2 more minutes of match, and then we're done.
Interesting.
Wow.
I hear Jim and Brian complain about that a lot on the experience in the drive-thru.
Please, do the commercials between the matches.
Well, that's when they have to fill in some of the stuff.
Okay, LOD at this time are wearing they're wearing their trademark shoulder pads, but they only have spikes on one shoulder. Now, the classic LOD look is the black shoulder pads, which are basically like football shoulder pads with the big silver spikes on them. When they came to WWF in late 1990, they went to red shoulder pads with the black spikes. And even though people say that looks phonier, I really like that look. I thought the black and red trunks with the red shoulder pads with the black spikes looked really primo. That's actually my favorite Road Warrior / Legion of Doom look. I don't know how familiar you guys are with any of the looks, but from the little bit you've seen, and at least seeing this version, what do you like better?
I'm not sure how familiar I am with any of it. I don't like this one, though.
Why is that?
That looks plastic.
Just try to... Well, yeah, the shoulder pads are plastic.
It looks too
They're like
plastic.
football shoulder pads. What do you think they're made out of? You think football players are going out there wearing titanium shoulder pads? Or rubber? I mean, what are they going to be made out of?
Isn't look... Okay, you can have plastic and not make it look too plasticky.
But it's not supposed to look like anything else. That's literally what the pads are. It's
Well,
the
yeah,
spikes
but-
that are supposed to look realistic.
It doesn't...
I mean, that's what the pads
I
would
don't like
be.
the singular
It looks
spike.
too plastic.
And actually, the original version of the Road Warriors, they just had like leather vests with like the little studded spikes on it. They looked very, 70s gay nightclub look.
Not well. I would have gone with that description.
There was a very homoerotic look.
I still have not
Okay.
seen Ghostface since that first time.
I've got a
It was just a brief apparition.
George
Figment
Napolitano
of your
photograph
imagination.
book downstairs. I can show you some of the old Road Warrior looks. I mean, I guess it was supposed to be like Mad Max sort of inspired, and sort of just like biker dude, but
I know nothing about Mad Max.
it definitely looks like some
Why
sort
do I
of
know of it?
gay biker fetish. Like I say, the spike shoulder pads were the best, and the red ones, I don't care what anybody says, they were the best. Road Dogg Jesse James, son of the legendary wrestler Bob Armstrong.
I
What?
don't know.
I saw something that looked like a Wubba chicken in the bomb light.
Okay, well, say it out loud so everybody can hear. Don't
I mean, the ref just kicked
don't
out.
just like make it an aside to Alex. Share it with everybody. If you've got thoughts, share them with the whole
Well, it's
class.
gone at this point.
I like Billy Gunn's boots. Apropos of nothing.
Good choice.
I like the more distinctive looking wrestling boots. I wasn't a big fan of the cowboy boots. I didn't have anything against them, but the traditional wrestling boots, they're just standard. Sting's boots were a little strange, but at least they were different. But I like Shawn's boots a lot, and Billy's boots look a lot like Shawn's boots. I hear he was quite influenced. Oh, that's the classic Ric Flair face first bump.
Questions?
My drink.
Billy's with AEW now. He doesn't wrestle. He might wrestle here and there, but he's not an active wrestler. But his sons, I think they're the current AEW Tag Team Champions. And Billy's actually gotten over really big in his association with the tag team, the Ascension, I think is their name. I apologize if I got it wrong, but I don't actually watch AEW television. Not because I have anything against them, but because I don't have TBS or TNT, because I don't have cable. Because fuck paying for cable. But Billy's gotten over big because of his association with one of the other younger... Is it the Ascension? That seems right.
I have no idea.
But anyway, they have this big thing. You guys might have heard of it somewhere else. They call him Daddy Ass and Scissor Me Daddy. I don't know. I know it's made its way into other bits of pop culture, so I thought you might have
It's not in my
seen it in a
my
short
area
on
of
TikTok
pop
or something.
culture.
But in this case, scissoring is just like doing like the Spock symbol and putting your fingers together. It's not like the sexual... I mean, I'm sure they are playing on the sexual connotation, but they're literally not at the same time.
I have more questions.
Especially in scissoring, it's usually something two girls do, not two guys. I mean, two guys, they're just going to hurt their balls. Let's just be honest. Yeah, Timmy White back in the ring again. Did he like referee? Oh, no, because we had that blonde referee earlier. Lots of photographers at ringside, too. That's something that would disappear over the years. Owen Hart had a real reputation as a high-flying wrestler early in his career, and, the longer he went in his career, both because he'd had injuries and to preserve his career, he wouldn't do nearly as much high-flying, but always had a reputation as an outstanding wrestler. And I can't necessarily back that up, because I haven't seen a lot of Owen's best stuff would have come in, like, Japan and Europe and back in Calgary for his dad. So I've really only gotten to see the Owen Hart in the WWE, and his matches there were fine, and some of his matches with Bret were really great. But you don't necessarily see the best wrestling from somebody on the big stage in WWE. It's just not the product they're presenting, by and large. Which is not to say there aren't good matches and even great matches on WWE programming, even back then and now. It's just you're not necessarily going to have the greatest all-out classic wrestling matches are probably not going to occur in the WWE product. Billy Gunn with Mr. Ass on his sights. Although back then he was just the badass. Well, he was badass Billy Gunn, and then it sort of slid into Mr. Ass. But that was the Mr. Ass was more when he was a solo wrestler after this.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure he was still officially badass Billy Gunn at this point, which is a cool name. I think so. Anyway, I had a fantasy wrestler named Billy Badass.
I don't like his haircut.
Which is just a name for, and in general, somebody who's either is a badass or thinks they're a badass. Oh, you're just a regular Billy Badass, but it was a cool name.
Still don't like his haircut.
Well, you don't have to wear it. Although you have had a haircut very similar to that. I'm just saying. Yeah, I didn't care for the Hawk. And like Hawk and Animal, they just both have crew cuts. Hawk and Animal are the Legion of Doom. They just have crew cuts there, but traditionally...
Would they just hit us at the entire match?
They're in the middle of a feud with the New Age Outlaws over the WWF Tag Team Championships. The Outlaws or championship. There's 2 belts, but it's a single championship.
Mm-hmm.
The Outlaws had won it from the Legion of Doom back in late 97, and then LOD had come back and won a Battle Royal at WrestleMania 98 to earn a title shot, which I guess they would get at the upcoming Unforgiven pay-per-view, although they wouldn't be successful. But yeah, they were just out there because they're in the middle of a feud with the Outlaws.
Okay.
But as I was saying, traditionally Animal, who's the shorter, stouter member of the Legion of Doom, he had a mohawk, and Hawk, the taller gentleman, had a reverse mohawk where he had the 2 stripes down the side of his head, but nothing in the middle or the sides. They looked badass back then, trust me. You know, the big jack dudes with the face paint.
I like mohawks that much.
I like
mohawks rock. Hawk and Animal both no longer with us as well. Animal just passed away a couple of years ago. Hawk's been gone since like 2000. I want to say 2003. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but it's been considerably longer that Hawk's been gone than Animal. Here we go. I believe we're getting set up for a minute. Owen just casually passes him in the back.
Stripes! They weren't reacting to the camera as much, but a little bit on the side.
You've been watching a lot of We Bare Bears with Johnny lately. And for one thing, watched a couple episodes last night that I don't think, maybe it was the night before, but a couple episodes that I've never seen before. Or I hadn't seen on this latest. Johnny and I have rewatched it twice now. We started like in the middle. Well, we started at the beginning, but we were just watching it at odd times. And then when it was time for him to settle down, we started watching it at night. And we watched from the middle all the way through, back to the beginning, and then back through, and now we've since caught up to where we started again. Where we started back. But yeah, and most episodes I recognize either from having watched them with you guys originally or watched them with Johnny in the rewatch. But I saw a couple episodes and I'm like, I've never seen this, including one where Ice Bear gets hit on the head and he isn't Ice Bear anymore. He doesn't have that slick Ice Bear. He like talks like all fast and he's like, hey dudes, what's up? And
oh god.
He's going to leave the cave because he doesn't think his brothers are cool enough. And he's like, we're not brothers, we're 3 different kinds of bears. And he grows his hair out and yeah, it's bizarre. I didn't like it.
I'm sure that wasn't a dream.
No, I'm sure. And there were like 3 episodes in a row that I don't remember. So maybe he watched them without me one night for some reason, or we just accidentally skipped them. But yeah, it's crazy. But the point I was getting at is I find it interesting that...
This is buff.
Yeah. Well,
and a lot of these people are.
That's not even the most jacked you see Vince. As he would start to appear on camera as a performer more and more, he'd get even more jacked.
I think it's less that Vince is buff and it's more that Vince is surprisingly buff.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Vince was a bodybuilding enthusiast, and he was probably on steroids like a lot of the wrestlers.
So what was with bodybuilding and whatnot during this time? I feel like a lot of the older wrestlers are super buff.
Well, I mean, part of that is just the nature of the business. The bigger the body, the more the attraction. I mean, you think, hey, bigger guys are going to be stronger, that it makes more sense that they could dominate a physical sport. And that was also partly just Vince's predilection, too. He liked the big body guys. But back to We Bare Bears. Before I get too far off
big
topic.
body guys.
Buff We Bare Bears?
No. I just think it's interesting that Grizz and Panda, when they talk to each other, they call each other Grizz or Panda or Pan. They never call Ice Bear. They always call him Lil Bro.
Interesting.
And nobody ever calls Ice Bear.
Maybe Ice Bear calls Ice Bear Ice Bear?
Yeah, maybe once or twice there's a reference, but as far as their friends that interact with him regularly, nobody ever calls him Ice Bear.
Then what do his friends call him?
Interesting.
Or do they not
Nothing really. Yeah, they might be like, hey, if they're talking to him as a group, they're like, but yeah, they don't. Ice Bear calls himself Ice Bear, and they just call him Little Bro. Even when they were babies, in the baby episode, not that atrocious Baby Bear series, but the baby episodes of We Bear Bears, they just call him Little Bro.
We Big Bears is only debatably canon, even. Probably not canon.
And
feels like its own thing.
Ranger tapes, I kind of got a thing for. Rewatching We Bear Bears, I kind of got a thing for Ranger tapes. I got to get my wife to do a Ranger tapes cosplay.
Oh my god.
But, she calls Panda Stripes. She calls Grizz, and she doesn't call Ice Bear anything. So so it's just weird. I don't know if his canon name is even Ice Bear.
I mean, he calls himself Ice Bear.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's just weird that nobody else calls him that.
It's his name, just nobody else uses it.
Okay, well, sorry about that aside from We Bear Bears. I mean, to be fair, I do have the bears tattooed on me. Somewhere.
Do.
I do, yeah. They're either right there or on the other side. Do you see them there anywhere?
I think they're on the other side.
Other side, Dill? Bears?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have them tattooed on my left armpit. Alright, here we go. Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. I guess the championship is officially on the line, too, since the referee's holding it up.
Blue.
Now, I do believe... Yep, if he wins that title, so I guess officially it's a title match. And for the record, Vince would be WWF champion in September 99. After Triple H won his first championship from Steve Austin, and he and Vince were having a feud. Not exactly a recreation of the Stone Cold Vince feud, because in this case Triple H was the heel. But they'd have sort of an impromptu challenge like this that would actually go forth with the match, and Vince would beat Triple H for the championship.
Of course, Vince would make himself champion.
But to his credit, though, I mean, he did give it up like the next week and set up a six-way match at the pay-per-view that September where Triple H would win it back. So it wasn't like he had a long run with it or anything. It was just kind of stunt booking. And I mean, it got over at the time, man. It's not something that's looked back at like, oh, that's such a terrible decision, like when the actor David Arquette was made WCW champion or when Vince Russo made himself WCW champion. Alright, I think at some point here Vince is going to insist that Steve tie a hand behind his back. Because I think Steve has said I could whip your ass with one hand tied behind my back. That's probably what Vince is getting ready to say here. He says, there's just one thing. You said you could beat me with one hand tied behind your back. So they're going to have Steve tie his hand behind his back. And, yeah. So, oh, come on. Whatever. I think Pat's tie is untied. He might just be going with the short sleeves now.
Interesting.
No, I think the tie is still there. I'm not sure. I'm very curious about Pat's tie right now. Because I hate the short sleeve. Yeah, no, it's untied. It's untied. It's like he's had a few drinks there at the reception afterwards. Or the bar after work.
Interesting. Real quick, you brought up having the bears tattooed on you. Yes, I'm going back to the bears. I looked, because I said I had prints of the bears, and I was curious for how much time I've spent drawing them. This is really weird. I spent about 2 hours each drawing Grizz and Panda. 16 hours drawing Ice Bear.
He's literally all white.
Exactly.
He just lines.
Well, this was a lineless 3D-esque style, but apparently I spent 16 hours drawing him. He does have his axe, at least. I probably spent some time trying to figure that out. Oh, what's happening?
Rope. Rope is happening.
Okay. That's an option.
Giving Austin just enough rope to hang himself with. The goatee that Austin was famous for, that actually came from the King of the Ring, the one where he would utter the infamous Austin 316 promo. He caught a shot from Mark Merrow, former husband of Sable, the current Mrs. Lesnar, and split his face open. And he has a scar from it, and he grew out the facial hair to cover up the scar.
Interesting.
So that's how I recall it. Now, don't hold me to that. I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't an intimate friend of Steve's, but I believe that's why he ended up going with the goatee. He might have only had the mustache then.
You know what's even sadder about having spent 16 hours on ice?
Well, that also doesn't sound right. Maybe it was before the King of the Ring that he did that, because I think he had the mustache and goatee, but he may have only had the mustache. But anyway, that's the story I've heard, is that he grew out the face hair to cover up the scar. I'm sorry, continue.
So what's even sadder about 16 hours on Ice Bear is I'm pretty sure Grizz is the first one I drew, and I used the base of him for the other two. It took me 16 hours to draw Ice Bear.
Why did it take you so long?
I don't know.
These are like leave. These are like do like a little bit, leave for like an hour, come back.
I doubt it.
I mean, of the three We Bear Bears, Ice Bear would be the most successful wrestler, right?
Yes.
There is an actual wrestling episode where they go down to Mexico and they do lucha libre for a time.
They would all be great wrestlers because they're freaking bad.
Oh my god, Johnny gets tired of me saying that when we're watching it, and they like have an issue with somebody and like they cower away or they can't deal with them. Like, you're fucking bears, just eat them. You're three of the most, well, at least the grizzly bear and the polar bear. I don't know how dangerous the panda bear is.
I don't think just eating everyone is morally correct.
That dangerous.
No, but I'm just, you know the point I'm getting at. You're a bear, I think you can win the fight. I mean, a bear doesn't have to eat you to beat you. But let's be fair.
I would not.
I can tell you, pandas are probably the least intimidating bears.
Yeah.
They can barely keep themselves
I don't know if
alive.
y'all are aware of this or not, but there are legitimate wrestling bears, or have been over time. That
Pardon?
Yeah, there are professional wrestling bears.
Tell me a bear's gonna suplex a man?
No, but they'd get in there and they'd you know, wrestle around with the guys. Guys have actually wrestled bears. What? Bob Holly, who we saw earlier on in the match, he wrestled a bear earlier on in the show. And Terrible Ted was one of the famous wrestling bears. He used to work for Brett's dad's promotion in Calgary, and then he would live under their porch while he was in town. Yeah, I don't know all the specifics of it. I assume maybe they have a muzzle on, but maybe not. But I mean, they're trained to go in there and interact with the humans. Like, yeah, they're not going to do anything crazy, and you're not going to get the bear to do anything that it doesn't want to do. But yeah, wrestling bears was a legitimate bit of entertainment at times in the wrestling business.
Choices have been made.
And Matt Bourne, when he was the one-time Doink the Clown, when he was Big Josh in WCW, he brought a couple bears down to the ring with him one time, but nobody wrestled them.
Those were not.
They weren't workers, yeah. And of course, we're coming to our conclusion here. We're actually not going to have a match. These two would finally wrestle at almost a year later at St. Valentine's Day Massacre in February 1999. They'd have a steel cage match that would see the debut of Paul White, aka The Big Show, in WWF. But at this point, it's all just an angle to set up Mick Foley and his Dude Love persona as the next challenger for Stone Cold's championship. Yeah, here we go. Dude Love's music's playing. Mick's coming out as the dude who was this was Mick's fantasy wrestler when he and his friends, when he was in college, they made some wrestling, not even videos, it was actually on film, but some wrestling movies, and he was Dude Love. So, you know, the cool guy, sort of, he described him as like Shawn Michaels' character would be. But that was his fantasy character, and then of course he spent most of his career as Cactus Jack, and he came to the World Wrestling Federation as Mankind, and then in 1997, after they'd shown some clips of his movies during this landmark interview series that he and JR had done on Raw, they decided to have him be Stone Cold Steve Austin's mystery partner as Dude Love, and that 97 was sort of the summer of love, and he would have a feud with Triple H that would see him wrestle as Mankind and Dude Love, and the character would largely go away after that summer, but of course we saw him make an appearance at the Royal Rumble in 98 that we watched earlier this year. But always as a baby face, and this is when Dude's going to make his heel turn. Because right now he's out, supposedly as the peacekeeper, trying to say, you guys don't need to fight, we don't need to do this, you know? And I think at some point Austin's going to push him out of the way or bump into him, and that's when Dude's going to turn on him, and we're going to set up the series of matches they had, one at Unforgiven, one at Over the Edge.
I like your call.
Oh, who doesn't?
He's great.
Fact.
He's got a podcast.
Nice.
I'd recommend it, Folia's Pod.
Nice.
One of the few... I don't really listen to that many podcasts anymore. I listen to Cornette's 2 podcasts. I listen to Folia's pod.
I definitely don't listen to a lot of podcasts.
When Bruce Pritchard can be made available to do a new episode, I'll listen to something to wrestle. And I'll occasionally listen to Tony Schiavone's podcast, What Happened When. And other than that, I don't really listen to any podcasts anymore. Not even ours.
I do not listen to any podcasts.
I can't listen to us. I don't want to listen to myself.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is... I mean, I listen to ours when I'm editing it, but then I lived it. I don't need to listen to it again, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting somebody else shouldn't listen to it. But
Yeah.
This is where you see it. It wasn't even that Austin went after Mick. It's actually a setup, because first Vince pushes Mick down, and then Mick goes after him. And then I think he's going to turn on Austin when Austin comes over. Then bam, here we go. So I guess the evil McMahon had gotten to the good-hearted dude. Although he looks confused, so I'm not exactly sure what the setup was even. I don't know if it was even ever properly explained.
What's up is he does what he wants to.
But regardless, now we're seeing the Dude Love heel turn to set up the pay-per-view match coming up later in the month of April and then again in May. The 23 Skidoo Knock Need Love dance from the Dude. And there's Babyface Shane. Not Babyface isn't good guy, but Babyface isn't he has a baby face. It's the young Shane.
And then Vince simply leaves.
Yep. No contest. I don't know if that officially Vince's first match or not, but...
Anyone gonna untie Steve's arm?
Nope.
And for the record, that match in February would not be the last time Vince got in the ring, but it would be the first time he officially had a match, as far as I can recall. This notwithstanding, obviously.
We can't quite see the rainbows anymore. Like, every time he's on camera, he's just slightly off.
Good.
So the camera's not really picking up with the stripes.
You're referring, of course, to Pat Patterson's shirt.
Yes.
Which, like I say, old video cameras don't react well to striped shirts.
I need an old video
The
camera.
wide stripes, unlike the referee's shirt, aren't a problem. It's the really close-knit stripes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I need an old video camera specifically to film.
No, that hurts my eyes.
I like it.
I
I
don't
like the
like it.
rainbow.
Now, I think we're getting ready to go off the air here with Raw, aka the Warzone. But this presentation actually has some bonus footage on it, which I'm kind of interested to see because I've never seen it before.
I've also never seen it before.
Yeah.
Vince, look, he's acting like he wants to get in there. But look, there's dude. He's calling out Vince. He's like, "Hey, you want some of me? Come on."
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure what the character's motivation was at the time. Yeah, that dance played better when he was just a fun-loving babyface than as the evil heel.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a little graphic on screen to show us when we've gone into the bonus content. So I think at this point we're still watching the original Raw.
Yeah. Think so.
I just remember the show went off the air with them fighting. I don't remember specifically the point it went off the air.
Interesting.
Interesting that I don't remember the specific point at which it went off the air.
Yes.
Okay.
Very interesting. Please tell me more about it.
The cameraman is down.
No, not the cameraman.
And there we go with the sign off. So this is the end of the show as it was back in 1998. But then now we're going to get some bonus content, which I don't know where it was originally. They're calling it Extra Attitude here.
Extra Attitude.
I mean, for all I know, this is something they even added back on when the network came about, but probably not. It probably existed somewhere before that. Obviously, it was filmed long before that.
Yeah.
They kept the cameras rolling, and the live crowd would be privy to all this. Yeah, I've never heard this promo right here. Dude Love says he's just shown that Stone Cold isn't so tough after all, and ow, have mercy.
Laying there.
On the announcer's table.
Yeah. What's new?
Jim Ross trying to it looks like he's trying to steal Stone Cold's watch, but I think he's just untying the rope that was on his wrist. Dude Love with that horribly drawn fake tattoo. It doesn't even begin to look real.
I don't think it's supposed to.
I think they tried to make it... I think it was supposed to look real. They just didn't bother putting in the effort to really make it look real.
Lol.
It doesn't feel like it's supposed to look real.
Mick does have a tattoo. He told the story of it that he got it to impress a girl when he was in school. He's got a tattoo on his hip. I don't remember what it is. Might be a Tasmanian devil, but it might not be. And Steve stomping in the back to go after his assailant. Are we going to get a backstage brawl? Oh, And here comes Triple H to spoil the fun.
Interesting.
I wonder if this is going to set up like an impromptu match. Because it's not uncommon for Raw to have what's known as a dark match, where after the show goes off the air, they'll actually have a main event just for the live crowd.
Yeah.
And this, I'm assuming, isn't something that was advertised, but it might lead into at least an impromptu after show match. Now Kane's coming.
Is
Everybody comes out.
I guess we're just going to empty the locker room at this point. It's like, hey guys, I want to play.
Oh my god.
Legion of Doom in the ring. I mean, if you're going to fight a monster, you might as well have somebody big and bad like LOD.
Is that Adam also come out?
Maybe.
The Rock want to come out?
Probably not.
I mean, maybe, because The Rock and Triple H would have a feud for a large portion of this year. Nope, here comes Taker. You see Jerry Lawler just casually making his way to the back.
Yeah.
I'm not needed here. I'm just going to slip on out.
I'm getting out of him.
Show's over. I don't need to call anything.
Gosh dang.
And here we go, Taker and Kane going at it. Big punches from Taker.
Is someone gonna come out to fight Taker
Over
now?
the top rope.
Oof.
Possibly, but I mean, his feud is with Kane, so it looks like they might just brawl to the back. What does that say? Kane was my... Somebody's got a
I'm not sure.
sign in the crowd. It's behind Paul Bearer now. Kane is my dentist because Glenn Jacobs, one of his early runs in the WWF back in the summer of '95 was his Jerry Lawler's, quote, dentist, end quote, because Jerry Lawler and Bret Hart had a Kiss My Foot match, and Bret made Jerry Lawler kiss Jerry Lawler's own foot, and the thing was that Jerry Lawler had been making his feet get all nasty when Bret was going to have to kiss it, but now Lawler's mouth was infected, so he had to go see his dentist, and he brought his dentist in to fight Bret Hart, and it was Glenn Jacobs in the guise of the evil dentist, Isaac Yankem, or I Yankem, which was like an old Bobby the Brain Heenan joke. Look,
My dentist is gonna fight you.
look, they're not all winners, okay? I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you what it
Some rainbow
was.
on the referee shirt.
Just because I know what happened and can recount it to you doesn't mean that I'm supporting it. It just means I know
Wrestling
that it
things
happened.
can
You were
definitely be
just
hit or
there to
miss.
witness it.
You know, it's history. You got to take the good with the bad. Stone Cold Stunner for
it's
the
like-
Road Dogg Brian James.
Sometimes you get the Stone
2,
Cold.
3.
Sometimes you get the dentist.
And there we go. It wasn't a match, but it was a match. Steve Austin pinned the Road Dogg Brian James, or Jesse James as he was known at the time. And even gets
Jesse
an
and
announcement.
James?
Probably from the Fink. I do believe I saw him at ringside. I don't know why Billy Gunn's holding Road Dogg's braids like that.
Who knows?
Austin's like, God damn, that was a strange insect. Anybody else gonna come out here?
Belt.
The popcorn vendor want to fight? I did not do a good Steve Austin voice. I need to work on that. I do some decent impressions. Steve Austin is not one of them.
They're all staying in the ring now. Is like, so, guys want to go out for drinks?
They were on a team at the WWF pay-per-view in July of '97. Little crotch shot from Hawk. Canadian Stampede against Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation.
The referees come to
Steve
fight
and the
now.
Legion of Doom, I mean.
So halfway through the match, the referee starts fighting.
Yeah, no.
The
That would be
referee was
interesting.
an undercover
I mean,
wrestler.
Flair would take a bump from a referee every now and then. I'm trying to think if there are any former other than like special guest referees, of course. They would
Yeah.
get physically involved. I don't know if there were any other former wrestlers who were referees. There probably have been, and I just don't know of them. Time for Mark Eaton to throw the beers in. No?
So
No
what
beers?
just happened back there?
Back where?
The people back there. And
Yeah, there's a lot of people back there.
and they like started ducking and looking around like, what's going on?
I don't know. I thought Steve was fixing to get some beers thrown to him by timekeeper Mark Eaton, but
Could you imagine the whole storyline, like, for a year, there's a new referee or whatever, then at some big pay-per-view, he just starts fighting in the middle of the match, revealing that he was the secret wrestler or something, I don't know.
I mean, the only issue with that is, by and large, the referees are smaller than the wrestlers. It might look kind of obvious if you had a real jacked up referee. Make me a manager, please. I don't think she ever became a manager, but maybe. She doesn't look familiar. Okay, here we go. Now's the beer time.
He's had to
just a
temporarily
middle finger
leave.
salute.
No beers?
Yeah, I mean, this might have been before the beer. Did he have the beers at the end of WrestleMania when he won the championship?
I do not remember.
Then again, to be fair, this is he's getting a microphone. He's got something to say first. The man's got something to say. Undertaker 316. Crowd in the audience. Crowd in the audience? Sign in the crowd. There's a crowd in that audience.
I would hope your audience has a bit of a crowd.
Within the audience, there's a small crowd. They're grouping together. We gotta watch out for them. I don't know what this voice is.
Almost sounds like you're Vegeta. Like you're not quite, but you're going there.
God damn it, Nappa. There's a crowd in that audience. They may be a threat to the Saiyans. Must keep an eye on them. Have you made Vegeta or Goku in WWE 2K yet? I think you have a Goku, don't you?
Yeah, definitely a Goku.
That's just because they had Saiyan hair, and you're like, well, why not?
Yes.
You didn't make Vegeta.
Yeah.
And have them have
No
a match
beer bash
together.
today. I don't know if this was before the Austin beer bashes or not, or just wasn't the plan for today.
And his special ability is to teleport it behind his opponent. Because you can do that in WWE 2K.
And the crowd cheers as we fade to black. And that was the Raw.
Steve from Minecraft.
That was the Raw from April 13th, 1998.
Yes,
Just
it was.
over 25 years ago as this podcast goes up. That was the one that finally broke the famous 83-week streak. The 83-week streak for which Eric Bischoff's podcast is named. And I was definitely watching it. I don't even know if I watched any of Nitro that night. Like I said, I wasn't home with my wrestling watching partner, my dad, so it was not as big a deal. But, of course, once we saw what was going on, you had to keep watching.
Yeah.
So what'd you guys think of it? A little more Attitude Era action.
It was interesting.
It was fine, but the matches were too short.
Well, like I say, that was sort of typical of this era. You were not going to get a lot of long television matches.
I don't like that.
Well, I mean, it was still a time when the arena show business still mattered, so you wanted to save longer matches for that and get people to come out and buy tickets, and also pay-per-view was your main revenue source by this point, so you wanted to have your longer matches there. And in WWF, like I said, they did not have nearly as deep a roster as WCW, who would tend to have longer matches on television. So they really couldn't afford to waste, marquee matches and have them play out on television if they were going to have them at their pay-per-views and at their arena shows. So I understand it from that standpoint, and I also realize that just kind of was the standard for the time. But yeah, I do like longer wrestling matches. But again, this is the weekly show. You weren't necessarily conditioned to expect the long matches then. Like you'd get that when the pay-per-views would come around. So I enjoyed it when we did get a longer match, but I was fine with this. As long as they kept the action going, kept the storylines moving, kept it interesting, it was good times. Like I say, 1998 and the whole Attitude Era, that was the most fun I ever had as a wrestling fan. Because I'm really fond of wrestling in the early 90s when I first got into it, but I can't deny I had such a great time as a wrestling fan during the Attitude Era. And we hope you've had a good time listening to us here. Make sure you come back next time when the conversation will continue. But until then, I am and will continue to be Maddie.
Lexi.
Dylan.
And this is LexiCon concluded.
Bye.